Welcome to MetaMagic, a podcast dedicated to and about tabletop RPGs. Today's episode will be about getting started and where to start in the world of RPGs. I'm your host, Brandon Jenkins. Let's get started.
Please listen carefully.
Today I'm going to talk about the best places to get started in tabletop RPG play. I'm going to tell you what to buy, where to buy it, what books and games you should start out with. Hopefully everything you need to know to basically jump in and get started. This will not be an episode teaching you how to play. I will do that in a future episode, but this is just going to be where to get all the parts and make sure that you're choosing the right game and spending your money wisely. That's the most important part, because you can go broke really fast in this hobby if you do not pay attention and are not buying the right things. So let's go ahead and get started. I like to start, I have three games that I think are great places to start for any new players. Firstly, I would say Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, D&D 5th edition is a great starting point because it's very friendly to new players, and I mean that in like a rules sense, as well as in an availability sense. It's by Wizards of the Coast. They're also the creators of like Magic the Gathering, and I'm sure a lot of other card games. But they have the resources to stock these books everywhere. You should be able to find one of these at any game store, any shop that's near you, Amazon, from their actual website themselves. Books are really easy to find. The rule set is really simple to get into. All you'll need is a set of dice, and then for DMing, you will need just the player's handbook and the monster manual. DM's guide, also going to be very handy, especially for new players. In this case, for 5th edition, it does have a lot of the magic items in it, but really just to play, you'll need just the monster manual and the player's handbook. Those are both going to run you roughly, depending on where you get it from, anywhere from $30 to $50. I think MSRP is $50 on each book if you're buying it directly from Wizards, but there are places you can buy it cheaper, such as Amazon. After you get the books, the only thing you'll need to do is buy a set of polyhedral dice, which can be your normal set of 8 dice that you can get at any game store or from Amazon. It's like a $7 investment. I recommend it, like just a decent Chessex pair, which should get the job done just fine. And that's actually all you'll need to really start 5th edition, and maybe a printer for character sheets, but that's going to be for every game. The rules are really simple for 5th edition. You basically roll a d20, and then add a couple numbers. You'll add your proficiency, what your character's good at, and your skill, what your character knows. That's it. And sometimes you'll roll 2 20-sided dice and take the higher. That's about as complicated as it gets. I'm overly simplifying the system, but that's about what you can expect with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Now, as far as playing 5th edition, also very beginner friendly. Creating a character just on the fly when you know completely what you're doing can take 15 to 30 minutes, probably for a first time, maybe 45 to an hour. The character sheets are not complicated. They only have a few sections that you need to fill in. Everything is usually determined by what your ability scores are, like your strength, dex, stamina, and then another stat called proficiency bonus, which goes up by 1 point every 4 or so levels. So it's not that much to add or really put together. That's basically what determines everything on your sheet. Those two things. There's a couple other things where you can pick a background that adds a few things, but overall not as complex as it's going to get in the RPG world. Very, very minimal, which is good. Lightweight for new players, because especially with people who haven't played, especially when they're not the dungeon master. It's going to be better to have really fast characters that you can make, especially for your players. Especially if your players don't want to make characters and you want to make them for them to show them the game. So all those are big pluses for Dungeons and Dragons. Also, the character classes, while you're leveling, they're pretty straightforward. They're the normal warrior, paladin, cleric, barbarian, wizard, etc. The same ones you'll find in most of the other games I'm going to talk about here. But the great thing about 5th edition is you can actually you have a bit of customization, kind of like a skill tree if you've ever played an RPG video game, where you can kind of be one kind of class. Like you can be a nature paladin, you can be a protection paladin, you can be fight with my sword type paladin, just a damage dealing paladin. Every class gets this kind of diverging path, but they don't have to choose it until level 2. Most of them are actually at 3. So you have some time for you and your players to kind of play with the normal build without having to really customize too much or specialize in anything. You have a few levels to learn how to do that, which is very nice. Past that, that's more or less the best parts of playing on the 5th edition system. Outside of that, there's also Adventure League that Dungeons and Dragons has, this is organized group play. That means you go to a place, you have a stranger be your DM, and they will run you through a scenario for about 2 hours, and then next week or the next couple days you can go to a different place or the same place and come back and basically play a different scenario with a different person, and you get to keep your same character, and you get to keep your experience, and you get items, and it's a really fun experience. I've done it before at PAX South. It's a lot of people don't like it because they feel like they're invincible, because you're not likely to die, and that's, if you're just looking to learn how to play, I think it's a great resource, because again, you have that safety net of not dying, and you, for the most part, you can play under different DMs and kind of learn other people's styles. You can learn by watching other Dungeon Masters play a game, as well as you can learn how to play by actually playing, and the Dungeon Masters are there to actually help you. The Adventure League ones are there for new players to help out, and a lot of times they'll have pre-made characters. I would strongly recommend probably going with a pre-made if you don't already know how to make one, and then maybe asking after the game if they can help out with making something like that. But definitely people who can help you learn the game. That should be available, like almost any game or comic shop should have some kind of Adventure League set up, because again, Wizards of the Coast has those resources to do that. The second game I'd like to talk about is actually Pathfinder. I love Pathfinder. It is one of my favorite tabletop games. I actually like it more than 5th edition, but that's not to say that 5th edition isn't a better place to start, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Pathfinder is more complex than 5th edition. You start out by fine-tuning your characters with those paths that we talked about earlier. You start out by fine-tuning them. You immediately out the gate have to make sure all of your stats and skills are on point, because you'll eventually graduate into a advanced class, that actually will happen at like level 7 or 8. You don't have those diverging trees. You actually have to meet a set of usually pretty rough criteria of like getting certain skills, certain ranks. You basically have to map this character's leveling out as you go, which if you're a more technical person or like to kind of complete those kind of like, it feels like you're working toward a goal with your character, is great. The other part of playing Pathfinder is that there's no rolling multiple d20s. There are actually a lot of numbers you'll need to get together on your sheet. You'll have a fair amount of skills. I think probably double, if not triple the amount on Dungeons and Dragons. And those are all going to have different values most of the time. It's a lot of number crunching. A character for Pathfinder, especially when you're good at it, you can do it really fast, but most of the time you won't, because there are so many options of putting together a character. It can usually take you an hour or more on just picking out the specialty you want and just fine-tuning your character to be exactly what you want it to be in the next 10 levels, which you're starting at level 1, so you still have 9 levels to map this stuff out. It is a lot of fun. You can do more interesting things with the Pathfinder system because there are actually more books available for it. Dungeons and Dragons currently has, I want to say, about 5 or 6 books total, which 3 of them are going to be the core books. With Pathfinder, if you want to get started, you just need the core rulebook and the bestiary, which is going to be the same as the monster manual. However, Pathfinder is open source, so you actually do not need to purchase those books. You can go on D20 PFSRD, and that's going to be updated whenever a new book comes out, and you can get started playing for free. That site has all the information and is searchable for everything that you'll need to start playing Pathfinder. So that is one of the benefits of starting with Pathfinder, is that the buy-in value is very low, and Pathfinder has... Oh man, I'm looking at my shelf now just to see. It's probably got... I mean, I don't have all of them. That's why I'm just checking to see. I have a lot of them. At least like 30 books for all different things. So if there's anything you can't... there's nothing you can't do with Pathfinder. In terms of fantasy, it's there. You can have army combat. You have going beyond 20th level. You have psionics, which is like psychic combat tools for fantasy. So you have near unlimited resources of things to do with Pathfinder. So it is definitely more technical type game. I mean, it's still fantasy adventure. You also have the benefit of also learning how to play Starfinder if you know how to play Pathfinder, which is not going to go too much into detail with that. It's basically just the space version of Pathfinder. It's technically in the same setting, but might as well not be. And then finally with Pathfinder, you do have your own type of... it's like Adventures League. It's called Pathfinder Society. It's a lot harder to get into and not nearly as many groups around that you'll see. And you have to register everything you do on their website, whereas 5th edition does not have that kind of demand. You just write it on your sheet, and then if a GM has, a dungeon master has a question, they'll look it over and ask you. With Pathfinder, you actually have to register and go through a couple hoops, which, especially if you don't really know what you're getting into, isn't really that beginner friendly. So if you're looking for any kind of organized group play, 5th edition again is going to be the way to start. Finally, the last game I'd like to talk about is going to be Call of Cthulhu 7th edition, which is kind of a curveball. You probably wouldn't see this one come up a lot, and that's because I recommend this game because it has the best roleplay aspect out of all of them. I really enjoy roleplay. I think it's really important. I think a lot of people forget that VR and RPG is for a role-playing game. I'm not a big fan of what are called meat grinders, which are just fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting and fighting. I'm the type of person who, if there's a combat, I'm going to try and talk my way out of it in-game, or I'm going to try and go around it because I just don't want to deal with it. I'd rather feel really smart and go around it and think, yeah, I talked myself out of it. But that's how Call of Cthulhu is going to be. The reason I really like Call of Cthulhu as an RPG, even though it's set in 1920, so in 1930 most of the time, so it's completely out of left field from Pathfinder and 5th edition. But the character sheets are very easy to create. I would say pretty much equally as easy as Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. And I do like that Call of Cthulhu will force you to kind of role play more, because the premise of Call of Cthulhu is that you're an investigator investigating like the cult of Cthulhu. So you need to go around and do your investigations, and you'll make a you'll make a character with like some kind of short backstory, and they have equipment that's relative to their backstory. You can more or less have whatever you want or be as rich as you want. It's not going to help, but you can, and that actually helps you with your role playing a lot. As well as the more you start investigating these cults, you start seeing crazy things, and when that starts happening, you start going insane. And when you start going insane, your character starts getting these traits that they act differently. Like maybe they're all of a sudden like afraid of being indoors, or afraid of being outdoors, or can't ever be alone. Things like that. Like they just get attached to them when they see these like horrible monsters. And so I really like any game with a strong roleplay that especially teaches new players, like, hey, you have to play something you're not particularly comfortable with, but I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to write here, this is what you have to do. It's different than what you would normally do, but like a lot of people have a lot of, trouble doing character development, and Call of Cthulhu definitely helps out with that. It is also really, really fun. It's fun being an investigator. It's fun investigating the cult. Most of the time you will end up dead as a player, and that's okay. It's perfectly fine. You don't lose. You usually just roll up another investigator, which is also why the character is so easy to make. As a dungeon master, it's really fun because you get to mess with your players and you get to kill them, and people already expect that they're going to die in Call of Cthulhu. Call of Cthulhu, unfortunately, is not open source, so it does have it does have 2 books that you have to buy: the Investigator's Handbook and the Keeper's Handbook. Both are going to probably run about the same as the 5th edition books, which are going to be about $50 dollars. It'll be a little bit harder to find. It does use a D10 system, which means you're going to be rolling mostly 10-sided dice. 2 of them actually for percentages. One's one number and the other one's a second number. So if you roll a 1, 2, it's 12. 3, 4, 34%. So your whole thing is to be based off percentages. So it's a little bit of a different system entirely. And there is no organized play with it either. So if you already have a group of friends, it's great. It'll work out perfectly. If you don't, you're just trying to learn these games, then this is why this is the last on my list, but still a third option, because a lot of people don't offer that third option. They usually have just 5th edition. They usually just say just 5th edition. Sometimes you'll get Pathfinder thrown in there, but that's about it. Anything else past that, so people won't recommend, or you'll have to dig around for the information for it. With all 3 of these options, I would definitely recommend staying away from any sort of like starter boxes. Hopefully this podcast will encourage that. I don't like starter boxes. A lot of people do. I don't. It's a waste of money, in my opinion. Why would I want to spend $50 on a box that does not contain any of the books you need to play the game? It does have some dungeon tiles, but you could just spend the money on dungeon tiles. And it does have a couple miniatures, which again, you just spend the money on miniatures. You can just buy those. So you get these starter boxes, and they make them for 5th edition Pathfinder, and I believe Call of Cthulhu has one as well. It comes with a small pamphlet with like 1 campaign in it, and once you play it, you're done. And so if you don't like it, then great, you saved yourself, maybe $150 on buying books, unless it's Pathfinder, in which case you just wasted a bunch of money because it's all open source anyway. But if you didn't like it. If you do like it, congratulations. You now have to go spend $100 more on books that you could have just bought in the first place because you already like it. It just doesn't make any sense. I'm hoping with the next couple episodes, I'm going to definitely go through and flesh out each one of these games and kind of break down like how to play them and like certain scenarios, which that's what the starter box does. But if I can save you $1, then I've done my job. So, and also while we're talking about extra materials, another thing that I would definitely recommend, again, coming from a Pathfinder background, I'm sorry if I use a lot of Pathfinder terms for this stuff, but usually this is across all 3, have these things. I think almost every RPG that you buy any tabletop has these, except for maybe Shadowrun. I think is the only exception. I think it's the only game I know of where they don't have what we call adventure paths. What I call adventure paths. That's normally going to be a book that is a preset adventure. In Pathfinder, they're called adventure paths. In 5th edition, I think they're labeled as campaigns. But you basically buy this book. Usually they're pretty affordable compared to the core books. They're going to be running like $20, maybe $30. But I'd say $20 on Amazon. You can grab one or two. Be careful about the ones you're buying, but they are pre-made adventures for you. Similar to what I was talking about with the starter boxes, but these are full campaigns. They'll take you all the way from 1 to max level, whatever game you're playing. They're a lot of fun. Be careful when you're purchasing them. With the ones for Pathfinder, you should be pretty good with getting any of them. Every year, Piazzo, the company that owns Pathfinder, makes about, I want to say 1 or 2, depending. They usually do, I think, six books, and they do every year. So going back to like 2011 when it started, you have a wide variety of adventure paths, and you should be able to choose in nearly any one of them because they're all written about the same. They're fairly straightforward. I'd recommend Rise of the Rune Lords is a great place to start, but really any of them will work. Rise of the Rune Lords was the first one they made and was meant for new players, and it's pretty easy to DM through. 5th edition, that's where I would be careful. A lot of them should be okay. The ones you want to look out for are probably like Curse of Strahd. I wouldn't recommend starting with it. I love Curse of Strahd. It was the first campaign that I DM'd for 5th edition, and it's always will have a special place in my heart, and I've read the actual novels for it, but that's a terrible place to start. It is mostly an open world book. You may want to go to an actual shop and skim through a lot of these before you buy them. As a new DM, stay away from like open world books or campaign settings. They're good investments for when you feel confident enough to kind of ad-lib on your own or give your characters free range. But as a new DM, open world's going to be really hard for you to kind of ad-lib and get together while your players are going through it. And it's also going to be really hard on new players who are all not really going to understand this open world. You can do whatever you want, without wreaking either havoc or messing it up somehow. Or just standing there kind of like, I don't know what to do. I don't know. You'll get that up from a lot of new players. So a lot of times that's you as a DM, you need to go through and kind of guide them. So it's better to get like a adventure path I am about to start running within the next week here is I have a brand new game of people who've never played before, ever. We're actually really interested in wanting to learn how to play tabletop. I'm going to be running Horde of the Dragon Queen, which it's 5th edition, Dungeons and Dragons. That's a good one. It's very straightforward when you go through it. It basically lays everything out chapter to chapter, and gives just like missions and a dungeon to do, and it's very just go here, go here, go here, go here. Same thing with Rise of the Rune Lords is very like that as well for Pathfinder. Call of Cthulhu, I believe their books are going to be pretty good to purchase any of them. Call of Cthulhu is not too open world because you're an investigator. You have to find certain clues to do certain things. So you're always going to be kind of heading in the right direction just because they're investigating. The benefit to Call of Cthulhu in this regard, though, is they do have solo campaigns that you can play. So if you like to test it out before like bringing in a group or just want to try something by yourself if you don't have anyone else to play with, Call of Cthulhu does support solo campaigns. A couple other tabletops will from third party, but Call of Cthulhu actually does it from Chaosium, which is who makes Call of Cthulhu. They do it from a first party, and they're actually pretty good and pretty fun. They're kind of like choose your own adventure games. So you're always like, oh no, I don't do that. I want to go back. But I want to go turn back to the previous page. So that is another positive to Call of Cthulhu. I believe that's everything I have to talk about on this episode in terms of just buying and where to look and what to get. I know it can get really overwhelming out there. If you guys have any questions or concerns, I'm happy to answer them on maybe even like a questions episode in between my main topics. I definitely don't mind doing that. And to help you guys get what you need to start, or to maybe it's not even your first RPG. Maybe you just want to pick up a second or third. Maybe you've already been playing 5th edition and you want to branch out to something else. I'm here to help. So tweet at me at cast MetaMagic. Find me on Facebook under MetaMagic Podcast, or feel free to send any emails, which I will also answer on the show alongside tweets. MetaMagicPodcast@gmail.com. So I'm here for you guys. So I hope future episodes will help out, and I plan on doing an episode on each one of these games as well, and other games that I love playing too. So thanks for listening.